If your agent or your insurer, whoever they were, doesn't ask you for your bylaws, red flag number one, there's a chance they will say, we're not going to renew you next year. And then if that happens, or they say, hey, your systems are now hitting 20 years old, we're not going to renew you. You now are in a space as an insured where, oh my gosh, I have to call all these insurance companies, get all these quotes. Take your phone, take a video, pull out every drawer, your silverware drawers, your dresser drawers, because God forbid you have that insurance claim where your house burns to the ground. You also might not even remember everything you need.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Real Estate Solutions Lab podcast. I'm your host, Tony Cardinali. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that a lot of people don't often think of, especially home buyers. Even homeowners may not be thinking of this because they may switch home insurance policies now and then. But what questions your agents ask or don't ask is on our docket today for talking. And I've got real estate commercial insurance expert Amanda Lyons today with me, and she's going to help us understand a lot more about it and some questions maybe to us as homeowners, me and one. And I learned something this week from her that I knew I needed to share. But Amanda, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into this?
Yeah, awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Tony.
You're
This
welcome.
is so awesome. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, so I'm Amanda Lyons, newly Amanda Lyons.
Yep.
Amanda Lucher is my maiden name. So I work at Lucher Insurance Agency, family business. My grandfather started it all the way back in the 70s. So insurance has been in my language, in my family forever.
Yeah.
So yes, you could say we're experts, but it's in the lineage for sure. So that's kind of my my background. But boy, are you right? There are so many questions that we have to ask.
Yeah. Well, let's keep it simple. I mean, starting out, why is it important for insurance agents to ask questions when they're onboarding a new client, starting up a new policy? These are things people won't often think about, but why is that important?
Yeah, and it's super important because everybody's different. Everybody's risk exposure is different. And so when you're going through that first new set of questions, the best example I can give is usually for a condo, just to start first and foremost. If you're a condo owner, you probably have bylaws as well as a master policy.
Yeah.
A master policy is a little bit hard to explain when that gets into insurance jargon. But when you look at the bylaws, that's a little easier to grasp. Your condo bylaws will tell you, all right, maybe you're responsible for just the contents inside of your condo. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it will say you're responsible for everything, including the walls. Or maybe it will say something so specific. It will say you're responsible for the oven. It's connected to the wall, the dishwasher, but not your washing machine if it's in. So they can be that specific. And when you're writing out what you need to insure for yourself, if your agent or your insurer, whoever they were, doesn't ask you for your bylaws, red flag number one, because that means they genuinely just do not know what you are responsible for versus what the condo complex is responsible for. So that's just one of the big first examples of why it's important to be asking questions, is because in general, your exposure, we're not sure of exactly what exposure is unless we ask. But when you take it down to something even more common, homeowners, renters, policies that don't deal with bylaws, anything like that, break it down to something like owning a dog. We're going to ask if you want a dog. We're going to ask things like that. And sometimes some insureds will think, ooh, should I pretend I don't own a dog? Does that mean that I'm going to not be able to get coverage, or does it mean my policy will be expensive? Well, the reason why it's so important to answer truthfully is because even though we hope insurance companies would never be this cynical, technically, if you lie on an application or if you omit something, if your house burns down from a fire and they found out that you had a dog the whole time that you didn't put on your policy, your policy can be void even though the dog had nothing to do with the fire.
Wow.
So when people ask me those questions sometimes, hey, I know that I have a dog, but can we leave it out? I give them that very honest answer. And I'll say, if you have a claim, why were you paying for your insurance in the past 10 years? If it gets void just because you didn't want to pay maybe a little extra to
Right.
put down that you had a dog, right?
Well, it depends on what kind of dog, right? I mean,
Exactly.
it might be, yeah, okay.
Exactly. And that actually kind of takes me to another point too. So depending on the type of dog, it's really important to know if you live in Massachusetts versus New Hampshire. Now, for your podcast listeners, are they in both states?
Yeah, there'll be Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another interesting piece I really wanted to make sure we brought up today. Massachusetts, we are lucky in some ways and unlucky in other
Yeah.
ways, if you want to look at it like this. We have what's called a fair plan, which is great because if somebody can't get insurance for
Yeah.
whatever reason, one of them sometimes could be if you own a dog that's on the doggy no-no list.
Yeah.
It could be if you have a historical home that is extremely hard to insure. We can get there because that's a
Yeah.
cool one too. But we have a fair plan. So our standard carriers in Massachusetts, they Plymouth Rock, Commerce, Safety, some of them that you've heard of, they don't have to say yes to anything they don't want to say yes to. Dog,
Mhm.
historical
Mhm.
home, knob and tube wiring. We can
Right.
talk about. They don't have to say yes because Mass Fair Plan is available to those residents. So they can just go to Fair Plan, which is a
More
pricier
expensive.
policy.
Yeah, okay.
Back it up. If you're in New Hampshire, there's no New Hampshire Fair Plan. So their carriers actually will most likely insure any doggy no-no list, any historical home for a major increase in premium.
Oh, so you could still get the insurance. You had knob and tube wiring or something, but they're just gonna say, yeah, we'll do it, but here's the cost of that risk.
Right. Whereas
okay.
Mass can't increase premium for it because they have an option elsewhere. So they're not allowed to do that. So New Hampshire residents have to be even more cautious and honest because if they're not, then there's a chance that no carrier will take them. There's no fair plan, New Hampshire Fair Plan. So there's a scenario actually that happened about a year ago at Lucher Insurance's
Yeah.
office in Chelmsford. We were insuring somebody in New Hampshire. They had a dog bite and they already had been honest and had their dog down on the policy, but the dog bit the mailman. And so then no standard carrier at all was even going to offer them a policy without a premium. So they had to move to surplus lines. 3 times the price. Surplus lines is insurance jargon for anybody that doesn't know. It's really just a last resort, very specialized type of policy, and it's triple the price. So our office manager, Terry, decided to call the New Hampshire Education Director of Insurance and say, in your honest opinion, for New Hampshire residents with dogs, what do they need to do? And she said, basically self-insure. So if you don't get exposed on day one to these risks and even just understand for yourself, never
Yeah.
mind your insurance agent or your policy, what you're up against, it's so important to know what those risks could be.
So
And
asking questions is part of exposing the risk. Understand, like I wouldn't know, if a feature of my home or something I have in my house would cause my insurance to go up. So what are some of the questions that agents are asking?
Yes. So, I mean, a couple of good examples that are really important to ask, some that don't hurt you or even raise your premium in any way.
Yeah.
But if you don't tell them, it could really hurt you in the end. One of them is actually if you own a gun at your house. If you don't disclose that with your agent, anything that happens related to the gun, liability-wise, injury-wise, even property damage, if that's what that being the case, it won't be covered. If it was just listed and just told your agent, every possible claim that falls under your homeowner's policy is covered then.
Yeah.
So being honest in that way, but then even on standpoints of uncovering gaps in coverage.
Right.
I have a great friend that has some ATVs.
Yeah. I know them.
I know that guy, right? And what's funny is when you're insuring, when you're such a good insured, you
Yeah.
even go as far as getting yourself an umbrella policy.
Yeah.
For the listeners, an umbrella policy is a policy that covers above your underlying home and auto
For
policies.
liability.
Yes,
Yeah.
the liability portion. So you have $500,000 of liability on your homeowner's policy. Well, if you have that umbrella for $1 million, now you have $1,500,000, right? So
Right.
even if you're somebody with that much coverage, if you don't tell your agent that you own an ATV or a snowmobile,
Yeah.
any accident, liability problem, property damage that happens from those, your umbrella doesn't kick in to
Right.
that. So you need to ask, your agent needs to ask all these silly questions because
Yep.
you need to be covered for them. Another really tough one is slab foundation. So some people, why do you need to know if I have a basement versus slab?
Yeah.
This one is because if you have a claim and there's a slab foundation, to fix that, you actually need to rip up the whole yard.
Oh, if there's a plumbing claim and it's under the slab.
Yes. So
that would be
that
huge.
is actually a much more expensive fix to a claim or an issue. So you need to be insured differently there. You need more coverage in one area, maybe less in a different one.
Okay.
So in order to personalize your insurance and actually get it to be what you need and what you've been paying for, you want to make sure that when the time comes that when you have a claim, it's exactly what you need and there's no gap that could let them void it.
Right. So those questions, like I've noticed clients once in a great while come to me and say, why is my agent asking me so many questions? And it's exhausting for some of them because they don't know the answers to the questions on the house they're buying.
Yes.
So they have to go they have to go ask somebody, ask the seller, ask the listing agent.
Yeah, the hard questions, the year of updates must be what you're getting to.
Well, all of it. Year of
absolutely.
updates is the real big problems.
Like,
what if they say, I don't know?
Right. Like, exactly. Like owning a dog, those types of things, sure thing.
Easy.
That you take us to the tough part, Tony. So that's what's nice. And I guess a side note is Tony and I work together a lot and we work with a lot of the similar real estate agents too.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have a team where you can ask each other questions with this. But there are 4 really important pieces to your home that matter the most in your insurance policy.
Okay.
Ready? Heating system, electric system, plumbing, and your roof. And the 4 of those have the same exact thing in common that they look for. They want to make sure, most agents only care about 30 years, but they want to make sure that they've been updated within the past 30 years. Some insurers even want them to be updated in the past 20.
Okay.
And the reason being is all of these big carriers, wherever their headquarters are with 20 floors, do studies where what caused the most claims last year? What caused the most claims the year before? Why did we have to pay out so much premium in this spot? And the biggest claims are caused from that exact problem. If you have a heating system that's over 30 years old, plumbing, your roof is really old, you live in New England, that's going to be a problem in the winter. You know, you live in Florida, happy hurricane season, you know, stuff like that. So those 4 systems are what are the 4 questions. When I go through the questionnaire, people know if they own a dog, right? They most of them know the year their house was built, or we can find that. But it's hard for them to know exactly when that system was updated if they're just buying the home. Or it's also not even always easy for them to know exactly what the system is. Like, is the plumbing PVC? Is it copper? Is it both? So those 4 questions are what Tony and I go back and forth on a lot, right? But that's why, it's because those claims are caused by that a lot.
And so those happen to be just coming up with those different carriers, and we want to make sure. Well, it actually helps you pick the best carrier for the client too. That makes sense.
It does, and that what a good part of that is when you're at an agency versus a direct writer, which I guess is a shameless plug, right? To being an agent personally, is when you're at a direct writer, you are officially somebody that has to do their own homework.
What's a direct writer?
A direct writer is if you are, you know, I'll name multiple names so it doesn't seem like I'm calling somebody out.
Company?
Yeah, okay. Like a huge one that doesn't work with agents.
Okay.
So like Allstate, Geico, Liberty, they all have their own hubs. I even started at one of them, right? So no harm, no foul. They're great companies, but when you have a claim there, there's a chance they will say, we're not going to renew you next year. And then if that happens, or they say, hey, your systems are now hitting 20 years old, we're not going to renew you. You now are in a space as an insured where, oh my gosh, I have to call all these insurance companies, get all these quotes. If you're at an agency, we work with 20 plus carriers. So when we ask you all these questions and we see, okay, this person has a dog, safety might be better to place them with. Or also, if you say, I'm going to be non-renewed, and you call us, or we get that notice, if we see it first and we call you, we say, okay, we'll get you to a different carrier without any gap by your renewal date, no difference.
Fascinating.
And that information and all those questions that we can ask allow us to know where to place you next, because we know your personal situation.
I love it. A question that I've had in the past, and you know, lying
Yes.
is one of those that I've heard people say, "Oh, I'm just not going to tell the
Yes.
agent." Well, I didn't lie in my situation. I want to tell a story. When I had gotten a policy, I think you guys started me with a carrier, and then I get a letter in the mail, and they said, "You have moss on your roof." I said, "Do I?" And I went around, and sure enough, I had moss over my garage. They said,
Creepy.
you need to clean that off." I was like, "Okay," and I went and fixed it, and I had had it removed. But talk about that element, which is the drive-by, look at your house type of
Right.
thing,
Right.
investigate, see if you got a dog, and you said you didn't, and talk about people that don't tell the truth.
Yeah, 100%. And that's also why it's important for the agent to ask questions,
Yeah.
because poor you if you didn't even know you lied
Yeah.
because they didn't ask,
Right.
right? It's that's why you want to make sure they ask these questions. But it's so true, Tony. So a couple of funny examples, just to I guess basically take the point home. An interesting one these days is actually smoking and vaping, and
Huh.
that can bring me into the world we're in. So the carriers now ask if you smoke or vape. That is one of the biggest lies. And if you have a fire that is a total loss, the carrier is going to do everything they can research wise. So what you experienced, Tony, with the moss on the roof, that's very standard for
Yeah.
when you're insured with a brand new carrier. They'll do an exterior kind of, walk around. Oftentimes they'll call you and tell you first. They really should.
Yeah.
But they sometimes do a flyover
Well,
or even
I live in the
Google Earth.
middle of the street, so they just drive around
Right,
it.
just
And there
drive
it is.
around, there you are, right? They
You can
take
see
a
it.
look.
Yeah.
Sometimes from that conversation, sometimes carriers even give us a call and say, you should really tell them to upgrade their steps or something like that.
Okay.
That's a very easy, common thing. But what can happen from that is sometimes they can uncover, oh, did I just hear a dog barking in there?
Yeah.
Do they have a dog? Right. But what takes me to the crazy examples of the extent that these carriers will go to is the smoking and vaping is a good example. If you have a fire and it's a total loss, those are the claims when they're that high in price that get researched.
Yeah.
They get the neighbors could be interviewed about things.
Wow.
So if they go on social media and see that said address had said young teen friend over that maybe the parents didn't even know was smoking in the basement, even if that's not exactly how the fire started, things like that can make your claim void.
So they can really look.
They can.
Wow.
Okay. So a couple of examples that I have to say that are in my opinion a little goofy and funny, but they'll put it into perspective. A workers' comp insurance claim. Workers' comp, for the audience, that's a business insurance claim. So if you have an injury at work and you need to be paid out while you're injured, they filed a workers' comp claim and then posted a video lifting weights on social media the next day.
Oops.
Claim void, totally void, right?
Yeah.
Auto theft claim one. This was very interesting. Somebody actually, I'll take you through. So tried to submit and said, oh my gosh, my car was stolen and dumped in a river, right? So then regular questioning. Okay, absolutely, tell us the story. Couple of questions uncovered that he only had one car key. So then he clearly forgot the day and age we live in that car key was able to be tracked. With further research, he trashed his own car, dumped it into the river, and wanted to claim a total loss of theft. Uncovered,
so
right?
Insurance fraud does not pay.
and then just two really quick last examples. Even something that's small and as common as an auto collision. I know we're on homeowners, but just so the audience knows, somebody once tried to say that their car was still and that they were hit, and they're forgetting that the car technology shows that it was in motion during the crash.
Yeah.
And last but not least, back to the dog. People forget, is your dog microchipped?
Oh, yeah.
Very easy
A lot of people
to
do
find
that.
Very easy. It takes like a click of a button on the veterinarian's database.
Yep.
Oh, yep, that dog does exist and it is owned by that owner at that address.
Wow.
So the lying is easy to find.
Yeah.
And if your insurance agent isn't asking you these questions, it's almost cause for concern because you just want to make sure you're covered correctly.
So definitely both tell the truth and, are there any fundamental questions that our homeowners, I obviously work in the mortgage business, so homeowners is who I'm talking to. Are there any fundamental questions they really should demand that their agent be asking? Like if they're working with a carrier that's not asking them anything and handing them a policy, what do they do?
By far most important, in my opinion, is if you're a condo owner, you need to have these conversations.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the risk exposures I've seen, even in our small circle, Tony, it's really drastic if you don't have somebody asking for bylaws in a master policy. And unfortunately, in the cynical side of this industry, sometimes you have some people that have like a sales quota down their throat. I'm very lucky I'm not one of them.
Right.
But sometimes they do. And sometimes if an insured acts frustrated and says, I don't know where to find my bylaws, or I don't want, sometimes you'll get somebody on the other end of the phone. Okay, it's fine. Maybe we don't really need them. I think it seems like it's this type of a condo bylaw policy. What do you mean you think?
Yeah,
so
right.
that's where I would really demand to send them the bylaws and make sure they read them.
If you're buying a condo, getting the bylaws, getting the master policy.
100%. But then the other stuff, the pieces we already reviewed are important because you could have gaps in coverage or get caught for a lie. But some of the important stuff, even to make sure that you're getting the good benefits that you should get, if they're not asking you about your alarm systems, you might be paying more than you have to.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So alarm systems.
Discounts.
Yeah, right. The discount stuff. If they don't ask you if you have a membership to AARP, that's a discount to almost every carrier. So AAA is a discount on your auto. So what's interesting about those alarm systems for homeowners, especially if you're a new homeowner, like a lot of your audience might be, if you're putting in a Ring doorbell, that even is a discount with some carriers. If you go as far as getting a fire alarm that is central reporting, a burglary alarm that is central reporting, or last but not least, a water detection alarm system. Those three things can save you so much money on your policy because when you think about it, that really can prevent a claim. What this is, central reporting means if your fire alarm goes off, say you're away at your house in Maine or something, the fire department gets notified immediately from that alarm system. You don't even have to be there, and they're notified. They run over and they fix it. Same thing with the police department with the central reporting burglary alarm. And the best one, in my opinion, on an insurance standpoint, is that water detection. If you're states away and all of a sudden a flood's starting at your house, not only does that alert your local, it's either the fire station or the police station. I'll have to get that one. It alerts local authorities, but it also shuts off your water once it hits 2 inches.
Oh, smart.
So what a great client to insure. Because you're probably never going to have them have a flood.
Right.
So if your insurance agent's not even asking those questions, you might be paying more than you need to.
Got it. So it's not only going to be preventing losses that can't be paid or won't be paid by the insurer, but it could be saving you money just getting the policy in the first
Automatic
place.
generator
Smart.
is one I forgot to. Yeah, if you have a
Your
generator.
approach clearly goes above and beyond with what I see a lot of carriers doing for their clients. Why is it so important for you to provide that kind of service?
I love when people ask that because it's my favorite thing to answer. When you're in a family business, there's more of an even emotional tie to it, right? So I did work at a big carrier first, and it was to make sure that I got my feet wet and I was an asset to the family business, not just an add-on, right? So I saw what was going on there, and good stuff across the board, except for the fact that people didn't really necessarily feel a tie or a long-term, like as if they needed to keep clients for generations or families for generations, right? So if somebody needed to make a quick sale, XYZ, we go the extra mile because starting from my grandfather, moving to my father, my mother, and now to me, it's always been really, really preached that you do the right thing, and that's what has a client stay for 20 plus years. You do the wrong thing, and that's when a client might stay for 20 minutes. And so we may ask more questions than most people, but that's because we make sure every possible exposure is fixed for you. We never want you to be surprised or think that there was something that should have been covered that wasn't. But also at the standpoint of, if you're an agent that doesn't, then there's room for animosity in your client agent future, because we want to make sure, even though you might be a little bit irritated, it's going to take you 10 more minutes to talk to us at the very beginning. You're never going to have those types of surprises of, I thought I was covered. Oh my gosh. So when you're in a family business, you care a lot more about 50 years than you care about your 15-minute quota. We don't have a quota.
Yeah.
So the way that we perform well for our agency is to make sure everybody
Very
stays
cool.
long term.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That was really
Yes.
helpful.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on.
Any kind of other parting comments or things people should know? I mean, obviously, this is about real estate mostly, but if there's anything about insurance in general that, maybe some new types of insurance that are coming up. You mentioned the plumbing alarm.
Yes.
What new types of things in the insurance world should a home buyer or homeowner, know about?
So that's interesting. I mean, one of the biggest new coverages that needs to be talked about more is cyber.
Cyber, that's right.
And it's a little bit more important right now for business insurance, commercial
Okay.
insurance, but there's still a lot of cyber coverage on your homeowner's policy that you could opt into. It's oftentimes an endorsement, also oftentimes a small amount of coverage on your actual policy, but for how big these hacks or these identity theft issues can be for your personal life, there is options to add coverage for that on your
Really?
homeowner's policy.
So you can do that under homeowners. You don't buy a separate
Identity theft coverage can be added, and
Okay.
oftentimes it's even included in small amounts. The other piece that I think is important for people to know is scheduling items on your policy. That one's so big because in the fine print of those 100-page policies that nobody reads, it will say, yes, you have coverage for jewelry, money, like cash, furs, like expensive furs, instruments, the list goes on, up to $1,000 is what it will say in the fine print, right? So, okay, so whose engagement rings or grand piano, if that's what you, anything like that, right? So the interesting thing is they're covered up to $1,000 also for anything except for mysterious disappearance or theft. What's one of the most common ways people lose their rings? Theft or mysterious losing it, right? Literally losing it. So if you don't just take a moment to get your appraisal of that item and schedule it on your homeowner's policy, right when it's scheduled, you get the full value back, even if it was just lost. So
got it.
Dental students might have equipment in their college dorms and might think that they don't need a renter's insurance policy. They might want to get a renter's insurance policy literally for that reason.
What about antiques?
Antiques are exactly that too. So that's something that sometimes renters even really aren't aware of. They think my apartment building's not requiring a policy. I don't own that much stuff. I have a bed and a dresser. But do you have an antique in there, or do you have a musical instrument that costs you a lot of money, or a jewelry item? So scheduling expensive items, no matter what policy, condo, renters, home, there's no adequate coverage unless it's scheduled.
Do I run around and make videos of my stuff? And then
I would if I were you.
Okay.
Terry, our office manager, and the cool thing for me is she's been there since I was born. So I refer to her first name. She tells everybody when they're a new client on the phone, if you have a moment over the next year, even when you remember, take your phone, take a video, pull out every drawer, your silverware drawers, your dresser drawers, because God forbid you have that insurance claim or your house burns to the ground. You also might not even remember everything you need to replace and what you want to put in as claims on replacement coverage and whatnot.
Okay.
So even doing that ahead of time might uncover, God, that's right. My grandfather gave me this watch back in the day.
Yeah.
I forgot I had this. If I lost this, I wouldn't get anything close to its worth. Yeah.
Amanda, thank you so much for coming out and joining us today. I think
Thank
we'll have you back
Tony.
if you'd like to come
I
back.
would love to come back.
I mean, I'm sure there's something else we could talk about, like antique homes and how to insure them and stuff. So I think our clients would really appreciate that. Well, thank you for coming out today. That's all we have today, folks, for the Real Estate Solutions Lab. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thanks, Tony.
Bye.